Hi guys, it's Renee and thank you for joining me for another video. Today I have a special guest with me, the man, the legend, also known as my dad. For those that don't know me, I am a family and preventive medicine resident and Australian trained medical doctor, and I like to do YouTube videos. So anyone that has heard an interview or a podcast or a talk by me knows that I often talk about my dad as my first mentor and inspiration for plant-based nutrition and the power of nutrition as medicine. So I thought I'd bring him on the show today so he could give his version, because I probably always get it slightly wrong and it kind of changes sometimes because I forget the details. So I thought we would hear it from my dad's mouth. So take it away, Dad.
Well, I'm happy to discuss or answer any of your questions. Anything that helps you in your passionate studies of plant-based medicine, I fully support. I know how hard you've worked for it.
Awesome. So let's start with the very beginning of our journey. So my understanding from what we've spoken about is you were just coming up to 39 when you received a very unfortunate diagnosis. So talk us through what that looked like for you.
I was feeling a pain and a lump, and I went and saw my doctor, and he did some tests, sent me off, and it was proven to be cancer. So I then had to go and see an oncologist and a surgeon and had treatment for the cancer. At the time, I was in touch with my GP, who was very progressive thinking, and he said, you must follow the oncologist's chemotherapy or you'll die. And it was successful. He said, think about complementary medicine. He was a believer in both camps. He said you should try juicing and plant-based foods and vegetarianism. So I went and studied it, and I thought it was a very good idea, and I believe it helped me.
Awesome. So going from that, what did the traditional treatment look like for you? I don't know how much you remember, but...
Sadly, I do remember most of it. It was 3 weekly cycles. I was in hospital for 7 days having the chemotherapy, which was quite unpleasant. I'd go home for 2 weeks, by the end of which you're feeling a lot stronger and you regain some of the lost weight. And then you go back in for another 3 weekly cycle. From memory, I think I had 6 or 7 3-weekly cycles.
Okay. And one of the things I've mentioned to people is, unfortunately, you were in the pre-ondansetron and pre-antiemetic situation, which means an awful lot of vomiting, unfortunately. How much weight did you lose? Do you remember?
It was about 4 stone.
Okay, what is that in pounds or kilograms or something?
About 56 pounds.
Wow, okay.
My clothes just fell off me. Your pants would just fall down.
That's so sad. So then how did the other part of your journey look? The more alternative or, whatever you want to call it?
I was an overnight discarder of red meat. I haven't eaten red meat now for whatever it is, 26 years. I thought I know people say different things, but I stopped that, and I didn't eat any pig meat products either, no bacon, hams or anything for those 26 years. I cut back on fish and chicken. I still ate some fish, some chicken and some dairy, but about 6 years ago, 5-6 years ago, I decided to go completely plant-based, and I've eliminated anything that does not come from a plant-based source. And I try the least processing as possible.
Would you say that you trend to more, that 6-year mark for you was probably more of a trend to a whole food plant-based diet?
Definitely.
Is that how you would describe it?
Definitely.
Okay. So my understanding, the way I explain to most people, is we probably followed very similar to a McDougall starch solution, starch-based diet. Lots of bread, lots of pasta, potatoes, some beans, and then lots and lots of fruits and vegetables. I feel like that's what you always encouraged me.
Yep.
And then we also really didn't have a lot of salt, oil, or sugar.
I've tried really hard in the last 5 or 6 years to totally eliminate oil. I don't use any oil at all, and I won't add salt to anything. And I try, and products I buy, you try and have minimal salt that are in it.
Awesome. We'll get to more what you're doing now in a minute. Let's take another step back. So when this started, what research were you reading? Whose books did you find? What information did you have? Do you remember any of it?
I do remember Pritikin was around then, and he was sort of poo-pooed, but I actually thought he was pretty smart. And with my sort of referencing, I usually read one and then go through the references, and it then leads to many others.
That rabbit hole that we all tend to fall under.
Well, I do anyway.
It's actually really funny because Pritikin's book is the first book I ever read on nutrition. I remember it was in the cupboard and I read it. So that's interesting. What did it look like? So this is the early 90s when plant-based nutrition, we were definitely vegetarian, we called it, even though it was very similar to what we would call plant-based now or vegan. What did that look like? What was, say, mum's reaction? What was your family's reaction? What did your friends think? Did anyone think you'd gone mad?
Most. Most, yeah. And they still do to today. But fortunately, my friends are usually pretty tolerant. They just sort of say he's the exception to the rule. But yeah. At that time, your mother, my wife, she was supportive and she didn't do any exceptions to mine. Maybe a little bit more milk than I did.
We've had this discussion about milk. It took Mum a little while to get on the milk bandwagon, but eventually she got off it.
Yeah.
Interesting. Okay.
And I've always, even pre that, I always liked lots of rice. So that's something that's been fortunate.
You and your rice.
Yeah.
Dad likes rice.
I do like a lot of rice. And McDougall and people like that say you could eat as much rice as you like, almost.
We were joking the other night because the bag we have that says serves 20, I think that served me, you and Josh. But anyway, so did you notice any immediate benefit? Anything you felt different? Anything? I know I'm asking you to go back. Is there anything you think? A question I get from a lot of people is, do you think that doing the juicing helped you tolerate chemotherapy, or did you feel like changing your diet helped you recover? Did you seem different to other people that were having chemotherapy? Anything that you noticed? And it's fine if the answer's no, I'm just curious. Do you think it had any immediate benefits?
Of course, I had nothing to compare it with, and that's the part. I felt really bad, and the people around me that were having treatment seemed to be equally bad. But I just sort of thought in the back of my mind that, juicing was good, and maybe it was mind over matter. I don't know. I just thought it was a good idea. In fact, I almost did it to extremes because I remember my fingers getting too much orange from carrot juice and things. And
I remember this.
So I then switched to things I still like today are things like raw beetroot juice. I really quite like that, and I believe that's supposed to help you out, and I like it. And I do. I don't have much juice these days. I tend to have the whole vegetable.
The whole fruits and the whole vegetables. Yeah, cool. When you were doing the juicing around your time of chemotherapy, were you eating as well? Were you able to tolerate food, or were you just juicing?
During the cycling, I just brought everything up while I was in hospital. So the first week home, I barely ate anything, just couldn't keep it down. But juices, for some reason, didn't make me vomit instantly, which was all food did. It was like an emetic.
Interesting.
So the juices sort of helped a bit, not great. The other thing that was talked about by the patients, there was a particular brand of yogurt, Mandela, I think it is, give them a plug. Their yogurt.
I think that's a WA brand. I don't think anyone knows that.
Their yogurt was supposed to have high levels of all the acidophilus and things, and it was supposed to be less processed and little or no sugar. And
okay.
So we all ate lots of Mandela yogurt. And once again, probably mind over matter. I don't know.
Interesting. Okay. Is yogurt something you'd recommend now, though?
I don't eat any yogurt.
Fair enough. So, I had another question. What was my thing? So, I remember eating an awful lot of pureed soup. Remind me, what was the story? Was that anything in particular, or that, again, just whatever you could tolerate? Did you have problems swallowing or anything?
No, it's just the vomiting, yeah. Okay. Anything that had any sort of substance to it just came straight back up. It was not very nice.
Okay.
So things like soups and juices, although they weren't bulletproof, they had less chance of being vomited up.
So let's move on a little bit from there. So you recovered amazingly, and I will be forever happy to have had a dad in my life. That's a horrible situation, unfortunately.
For some people, yeah.
Have you had any other health struggles in your life?
I've a bit of a crackly voice because I had whooping cough twice in about 3 years, which the doctor said is impossible. But there were two different strains. And unfortunately, my throat, according to my ear, nose, throat guy, he said it's quite scarred. So things can quite easily tickle it. And you heard me cough lots of times.
So you're just trying to pretend you don't have an Aussie bogan accent, and it's just because of the whooping cough. Okay. Yeah.
But apart from that, I don't think I've had anything else. I haven't been in hospital since then.
Awesome. And you've been 25 years cancer-free.
Yes.
That's pretty impressive. No secondary cancers. And you were telling me, which I didn't know, that you, at the time, had metastatic cancer, you were saying. Do you remember where that was and if there was any what happened with that? Did it just shrink as well, or?
From what I remember the oncologist telling me from the results of CAT scans and things, he said it was just metastasizing rapidly through the major organs and all over the body. He said that was good news and bad news. He said because it was spreading rapidly, the chemotherapy apparently is very effective.
Because of the rapidly dividing cells.
That's what he said.
That makes sense.
I
But
don't know.
kind of a little scary as a 40-year-old guy, I can imagine.
I just remember at the time, whatever the marker is that doctors use, he said it was supposed to be under 50 thingies, and mine was about 800 or 900 and increasing rapidly. Ooh. But within the first round, he was very, very pleased. The first 7 days, he said it responded how it should have.
Awesome.
I will tell you something that I know I've told you before, probably for the sake. It's a frightening thing, chemotherapy. You're lying on a bed, and in comes the doctor wearing a suit with his face covered, and he's got plastic all over him, and the nurse, and they're just completely covered so they don't get any spillage on them, and this is what they inject into your body. But
it's pretty scary.
For me, it did the trick.
Yeah.
So you got to accept some things.
Yeah, pros and cons, huh? But I think that it's really important, and what's really impressive is kind of the model that we talk about a lot with preventive medicine, lifestyle medicine, is, sometimes we can't predict life, and sometimes things happen that require traditional medical treatment.
Absolutely.
But then how can you then optimize your health so someone like yourself doesn't have a recurrence of cancer? To be 25 years cancer-free is pretty impressive. It's not uncommon to have a secondary 10 or 20 years later. So I'm hoping it never happens to you, but I think you're doing everything you can to optimize your health. So
I hope so.
So recently, over the past, say, 5 or 6 years since you went whole food plant-based, what made you take the step from a, pretty strict vegetarian diet to becoming completely whole food plant-based? What made you take that next step?
Just the people in the whole food plant-based things, the McDougals, the Ornishes, the Clappers, and all those people. And you just look at the videos and you read, and I'm very lucky. I've got a lot of your books and people's books. they all 99. I know there are tiny differences, and you've told me about that, but they all are on the same page, and Dr. Ornish has all the clinical research that anyone could ever want, plus some. And so I wish I hadn't read his stuff, when I was 20, because I think all of them, all that group of. So that's what really convinced me. And things like, I used to have occasional eggs, and I think now that was a very foolish thing to have. I don't think eggs are very good for me. For me, all these things I've eliminated, and I've become quite boringly bland. I love beans, I love lentils, I like legumes, I love my rice, and I just chuck them all in together, and I love it.
So what does a typical day of eating look like for you now?
I'm an interval faster, so I usually don't eat till about 12 or 1 p.m. And usually I'll have a large bowl of oats, not heated up or cooked, just raw rolled oats. And sometimes I'll have it on their own, but usually I add a bit of fresh fruit, banana or berries. And I don't particularly like any milk. I don't have dairy milk, and I don't particularly like the almond milks, the rice milks, the soy milks. So I just have water.
So oats, berries, bananas and water, right?
That's my lunch. And if I get peckish in the afternoon, I eat a lot of fruits. So I'll grab a couple of apples. Usually I have to grab 3 or 4 because my dog wants to eat about 2 of them. And I eat, I eat raw veg. I like carrots because there's things that are firm and easy to carry, like carrots, fruit. And then for an evening meal, as I said, it's just a rice-based, or sometimes split peas or beans or barley. And just add the other stuff to it.
You just make a big pot and chuck it all in, don't you? I've seen your meals.
That's exactly what it is.
A couple of days worth. Awesome.
It just suits me.
And do you add anything for flavours?
No.
Anything like that?
That's not true. Sometimes I'll add tomato sauce ketchup for you Americans. Unlike you, I like garlic and onions. So what I'll often do is I try and eat 1 clove of garlic a day. I'll chop it up really finely, and I don't add it to the food because, from my understanding, it breaks down with heat. So I just sprinkle on the top, mix it all in. And I know you say it's disgusting, but I quite like either a little bit of onion, a little bit of spring onion, or a clove of garlic.
So what made you get into intermittent fasting? It's definitely a hot topic, and people have heard my opinion on it. What made you get interested in that?
Well, I'd lost quite a bit of weight because I've been a very slow and steady weight loser. I was losing about 2 or 4 pounds a year. And I sort of plateaued out a bit, and I was still a bit heavier. And I just happened to read a book on it one day, and then I read a couple more, and it suited me because I usually didn't eat much breakfast. I'm not hungry in the mornings. So I tried not eating till 12 or 1 p.m. And I also try and cut myself off about 7 p.m. at night.
So that's like a 6...
About 18, between 17 and 18. Sometimes more, sometimes less. But And the side benefit of that is it helped my bloods. I wasn't diabetic, but I'd been in for that couple of tests where they inject the sugar in you, and the GP said, this is not good, not bad.
I'm pretty sure when you showed me you had pre-diabetes.
It wasn't good, but it wasn't bad. And since then, the intermittent fast, plus the elimination of a high sugar drink.
A high sugar drink. Someone was a little bit of a, a cola-flavoured beverage.
Yeah, well, I used to drink at least 1 or 2 cans of Coca-Cola a day. In WA, they have 600 ml, which is, I think it's a pint. They have a pint bottle or a couple of cans every day, 7 days a week. And it's just was a habit I got into and I found really hard to get rid of. So when I started the intermittent fasting, I also stopped drinking Coca-Cola overnight. I had 2 relapses, like I gave up for about 8 months, and then I just had one. Then a week later, I had another. And then I found after a few days you have one every day, and then I was back to where I was. So after a few months I said, no, I don't want that. So I then went back and I stopped again. And I was probably coke free this time about a year or so, a year and a half. And then I went back on it again. And at that time there was I had a calcium coronary test and a a heart doctor, cardiologist. He said if I do that, he wanted to put me on statins, which I didn't like the idea of. So I saw another doctor, Dr. Elise Churchill, who's very similar to you, and she said she wouldn't recommend the statins if I completely stopped the Coca-Cola. So I had this little mantra, it's either Coca-Cola or statins. Which one am I going to have?
That's awesome. And so, when would have been your last Coke?
18 months ago now.
Awesome.
And I think I've got it.
And you shared with me your labs and your triglycerides are literally directly correlated with
exactly since I've given them up.
So that was really interesting for me. It's something I'd kind of seen a little bit in the literature, triglycerides, and especially in the United States, maybe high fructose corn syrup, but that's not the case in Australia. It's sugar. So it was really interesting to see that dramatic response with triglycerides with you, and also your cholesterol fell, which typically we think saturated fats with cholesterol, which as a plant-based eater you were consuming none, virtually none. You don't eat coconut or anything that's high saturated in fat. So it was really interesting to see that your triglycerides were so high, and also your overall cholesterol was relatively high, and both of which dropped dramatically with really not a lot of changes.
And sadly for me, but Dr. Churchill got my blood test for about the last 5 or 6 years, and she said you could see go Coca-Cola,
wow,
and
that's
she said
crazy.
She said to me, I can guarantee I can tell you the months you were drinking it, and that empirical evidence.
That's crazy. That's
so
really,
she thought she was very
crazy.
clever.
So some people definitely talk about the addictive natures of food. Do you think do you believe that? That's definitely a controversial topic.
For me, Coca-Cola it's you can call it either habit forming or addictive. To me, it's the same thing, and it's a great weakness for me, and I have to admit it. I can't stop it, so I have to not have any.
I think that's really honest of you. Is there any other foods that you found challenging to give up? Or?
No, none of the others. No, not at all. That was the one.
So what would be your tips if someone had a cancer diagnosis and they said to you, Max, it's clearly worked as a support in some way for you. What do I do? Like, I'm a typical meat and 2 veg. Where do I go from here? How do I do it? I'm a 60-year-old man and I want to change my health. What do I do?
I think we older guys, it's a lot easier to go cold turkey, completely swap over.
Okay.
But I think younger people are probably better if they do it gradually. We older guys, we can see our mortality, and it's much easier, like as I said, it's either statins or Coca-Cola for me. It's either, and I don't like, I know statins save people's lives, I understand that. But in my case, they aren't needed if I eat a healthy lifestyle.
Well, your cholesterol now is extremely low. You're below the so-called heart attack proof 150, so you don't have an indication for statins anymore, whereas you did previously. So that's pretty cool for people that don't want to do it. So
plus, the third thing was, also my blood pressure has dropped.
Yeah.
Over about the last 5 years.
And you've also lost a significant amount of weight. How much weight do you think you've lost?
Probably since I first started being aware of it, Americans, it'd be 30 pounds.
About 30 pounds. Awesome. And you've maintained that now for multiple years.
Oh, it's slowly snuck down over the last few. It was sort of plateaued out at about 25 pounds in the last couple of years, just sort of going down. So I'm not going up, and I'm not yo-yoing, which I'm really pleased with.
Awesome. If you could take a step back, say 20 years, what would you have done differently? Like if you knew all of this 25 years ago, what do you think were your slips? Like what would you have done differently? What would you advise someone else?
I just take a completely plant-based diet and as whole foods as you can. And in my case, I like the raw ones. I ate a lot of raw vegetables. I ate a lot of raw fruits. And I think I'd have been a much healthier person.
Awesome. Well, the good thing is it's never too late to change, and you're the healthiest I think I've ever seen you. So it's pretty impressive. So
the other thing I'm really pleased with, my father, when we were kids at the impressionable teenage years, he was very anti-smoking. He still hasn't smoked a day in his life.
Yeah.
And I'm really glad because I think I am an addictive personality, and I think if I'd have been a smoker, I'd have been a smoker.
I always say the same thing. I'm so glad that you always discourage me, because I think I'd be the same. High stress job, like, oh no, thank you. So I think it's a good point. Don't start, especially.
No, it's just one of those things.
And Pop's a huge inspiration for both of us, of course.
He's a
99, World War II vet, pretty impressive. So
he's one of the last of his type. He's 99 in a couple of months, and he was a World War II fighter bomber pilot out of England, flying over Germany, which the survival rate was frightening, and it was the same with the Americans. They lost an awful lot of pilots, sadly. Yeah. But doing the right thing for their countries.
So, tell us about your new endeavour.
I've been 6 months. I'm a retired school teacher, and I used to do a bit of occasional relief school teaching when people are unwell, but I'm not doing that anymore. I bought a small little hobby farm about 3 hours from southwest of Perth in a reasonably high rainfall area, and I'm currently growing vegetables and fruit, and my long-term aim is to have an avocado orchard, and I hope to grow everything chemical-free, industrial chemical-free, should I say, and I can do that, I believe, and I'll either get certified organic or biodynamic or both, and I think that's the way to go, because I like the idea of being 100% control. Like I will plant the seeds, I use animal manures or composts, and I know there's nothing industrial. And I know people grow a lot of food with industrial chemicals, but it's not for me.
So explain, most people have heard of organic, and for most people that means minimal chemicals. What's the next step? What is biodynamic? Most people look at me like I'm crazy when I'm like, yeah, Dad's going to be a biodynamic avocado farm. And I'm like, what?
That is the plan. It may not come to fruition, but it's a plan. Biodynamic is just a much stricter form of organics.
Okay.
There are no exceptions. In organics, they do allow a few natural pesticides and things that are derived from plants and things. Biodynamics don't believe in any of that. They also believe in things I'm not entirely sure of, but they're great beliefs of planting and harvesting by the phases of the moon. They believe in some products called 500 and 501, which people think are a bit hocus pocus. 500 is made by burying cow manure and cow horns at a particular time of the season underground, and just basically ferments. And then it's this highly powerful thing. And then they believe I don't know if you know the preparation, they take an hour to prepare it. They have to keep turning it by hand. You can't have a machine. You have wooden paddles and you go back and forwards for about an hour. But although the conventional farmers poo-poo it, there is a lot of very good science that says they get much better results.
It's the case with a lot of scientific research, isn't it?
Yeah, you just got to... And I just have faith in it, and nobody's ever said it doesn't work. What the arguments are is the degree it works and the commercial value.
So why do you think that it is, I guess, more popular in farming to go a more traditional route using pesticides, herbicides, insecticides, big crops versus, say, something more labour intensive that we know doesn't have... Is it true that they don't have any smaller amounts of crops? It's just more labour intensive? Is that correct? So
yeah, it's absolutely more labour intensive. And they also are prepared. Most biodynamic farmers are prepared to lose 5% or 10% of their crop to predators, be they insects or birds or whatever. They'll put up things to try and stop them, but the conventional...
Like your plastic bird.
Yeah, which didn't work. The conventional farmers try for 100% yields and things, and it really comes down to profitability. The big conventional farmers are trying for maximum profit, and they believe their chemicals are right. I'm not judgmental. I don't like that. It's a bit like being a plant-based diet consumer. I don't tell anyone else how to live their life. I'm not judgmental, but I don't like it. And I honestly believe there are chemical there are a lot of chemical residues in our soils, our food and things, and I believe we should minimise it. That's just me.
I think that's a really good point that you raise. A lot of plant-based people ask about social situations and how to make it work. Do you have any tips for people? It's a really common question I ask. And I said it's kind of hard for me because I'm a little bit of an abrasive, stubborn person and I don't really care. So I'm not really the greatest person because I'll just be like, no, I don't eat that, sorry. How do you deal with situations like that?
So once again, I try not to be judgmental. I don't tell people what to do. I always say, from my point of view, and if I was a young parent today in the year 2019, I'd be deeply concerned about the amount of chemicals in the food chains. There's a lot of very sound research that says it's there, and the organic growers and biodynamic growers, they may still have a little residual, but that's in the atmosphere. It could be, that case in Kojonup, WA, where wind-borne GM stuff. It's not a guarantee, but it is just better. I just believe it's better, and it's also more ethical.
When I was a kid, obviously, as I've said to many people when I've spoken, I didn't meet another plant-based eater, like plant-based diet, vegan, vegetarian, whatever you want to call it, until I was in my 20s. Did anyone ever question that you were raising me without meat, or what was going to happen to your child?
I was very surprised that no one did. Like the standard thing that plant-based people get is, and to me still as an adult, people say, well, where do you get your protein from? And I've got a couple of stupid remarks back. My standard one is the biggest animals on the earth, elephants. They're plant-based mammals, and they don't eat milk. They don't eat milk after their progeny are weaned, and they've got big, strong bones, and they just eat plants. And I've also found out that there are some animals, particularly a horse, which has not got four stomachs. It has the one stomach. Apparently, its stomach and digestion is very similar to ours. Okay. And horses survive just fine on plant-based diets.
Yeah, they have a lot of muscle, huh?
Big bones, muscle, and so I think we can survive on plant-based.
Okay, and
it's got to be well monitored, of course.
Yeah, no one really questioned me growing up. I don't really recall that. A lot of people ask. I think that maybe there's more of an issue about it now or in America, but I don't really remember anyone overly questioning. We're just kind of like, yeah, this is what we do. We're a little bit alternative, but so be it. So.
Yeah, we just moved on. Yeah. Even now, people that I think are quite smart will say, how can you not want this and that? And after about literally 10 seconds, next topic, who won the football on the weekend or whatever.
That's awesome. Oh. So you were just saying, honestly, didn't get a lot of questions about raising a child plant-based.
Well, you were a normal child that you ran around, you played sports, you had friends, so there were no obvious indicators.
And yeah, from my, at least my memory, I was a pretty healthy, active kid. There wasn't really any reason to suspect that there was anything harmful. No. And you always taught me to be super polite about it, and that's something I share with people. Just be like, I'm sorry, not for me, and don't be judgmental, which I think goes a long way.
I do think some vegans are too aggressive with their attitude about other people. That's just me. I'm not judgmental, and I didn't tell the world that you were not eating meat, and I didn't tell everyone at every opportunity. I think that's being nice.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think a lot of people wouldn't have known because we were too busy talking about more interesting things than what we eat or don't eat. So.
Exactly.
Okay, so let's kind of wrap it up a little bit. Where do you see yourself going from here? What does the future for the Mayor of Wilkine, Mr. Max Thomas, what does the future look like for you?
I hope it's long and healthy, based on plant food-based diet. I do a fair amount of exercise. I walk quite a lot. I have the equivalent of an American truck that I don't drive around my place. I tend to walk. I use a wheelbarrow, and I've got a dog that loves running around with me, so I rather walk. And it does surprise me. I've got a tracker on my my smartphone, and I usually walk 10 to 12 kilometres a day, which is like 6 or 7 miles.
That's crazy.
And that's up and down hills.
Wow. And you bike as well, don't you?
Oh, and I ride my bike three or four times a week.
Awesome.
So I try and be healthy.
Awesome. Any final words? I'm not going to do the typical thing that people say is, where can we find you on social media? Because we can't. But any final words, thoughts?
I have a personal thing.
Go on.
That was in the foreword to a book by Dean Ornish, in his latest book. And I don't know necessarily who it credited to, but they said the plant-based food world should get right behind Dean Ornish and push that he should be nominated for a Nobel Prize for Medicine, because he is the greatest science-based, fact-based doctor in the world, in my opinion.
The thing that we were discussing this earlier, and I think it's just crazy because he has the only randomized clinical control trial, the so-called gold standard in medicine, that proves reversal of coronary artery disease. It just blows my mind that if anyone else published that, maybe using a drug or a procedure that could reverse coronary artery disease, they would for sure be a Nobel Prize laureate. Like, it just... Anyway, I'm with you on that one.
That's just
Dr. Dean Ornish for Nobel Prize. I'm with you on that.
Good. I hope it happens.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Dad. I appreciate you being part of my video. Yeah, thanks so much.